Binge the full week of The Ray Taylor Show ad-free over at inspireddisorder.com/plus.
This is The Ray Taylor Show.
The Matrix Resurrections, the newest movie in the Matrix franchise, about 20 years close to after the last of the franchise movies. The Matrix film, one of my favorite movies of all time. It's a movie that completely changed action movies. Like every movie since the first Matrix has been just trying to get anywhere near the close proximity to the epicness of all of the action sequences, and then set in a very interesting world where, like, we're in the future, robots are using humans as batteries, as a power source, and there's this guy who's able to, well, actually he's not, there's a lot of people that are starting to wake up into the real world and get unplugged from the Matrix, this virtual reality, or we could call it like what's probably going to be the metaverse. What Facebook and Zuckerberg is trying to do is basically the reality that people are in while they're being used as batteries. So, great franchise. Rewatched all of the previous movies, so Reloaded, Revolutions, and I enjoy them. I enjoy them more today than I did when they first came out. I think what they tried to do is inject a lot of story, a lot more background to this world in those movies, and then they also tried to do something that I don't think computers or animators are still able to do very well, which is animate, just completely computer generate realistic looking fight scenes instead of using a lot of practical effects, which most of the first movie was so amazing because of the practical effects and the fact that all the actors trained how to actually fight and do the combat to do it realistic, which even that is like, you know, you see movies like John Wick or whatever, they're all like doing the same thing that The Matrix started back in 1999. So this one's taking place 20 years later after the events. Neo reset the Matrix after his fight with Agent, not Mr. Anderson, Agent Smith. Their epic battle, Agent Smith became its own entity, and they had to battle to both save Neo had to win to not only save humans but also save the robots, because one of the themes throughout all of these movies is the symbiosis between humans and machines, despite the fact that they're constantly trying to end each other. They're constantly at war, but also constantly need each other. I mean, even the humans, they're still using like ships and weapons and other things of technology to fight the robots. In this one, the robots are more simpatico with humans. Like, there's robots on the human side and there's probably humans on the robot side. I would imagine software, it has the ability to like manifest itself via like these nanoparticle things. So it's real diversity within this universe where it's not just humans that are on the resistance side. It's also robots. It's also software that have defected from the Matrix. And it's also an updated Matrix. But we don't see any of that when this movie starts. We don't see any of that when this movie... Obviously, I'm going to be spoiling this movie. First off, I enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed the movie more when I watched it the second time, and I've probably put it on like 3 or 4 times at this point. It's really fun. It's not the first Matrix. You're not going to see mind-blowing fight scenes. The fight scenes aren't necessarily that great. There's some fun action set pieces, some fun things, but the premise is that like Neo and Trinity, they're not good at their stuff because of, you know, things that I'm going to get into. So it makes sense thematically that it's not like they're the elite of the elite. Like, they're past their prime, kind of, the one. But I want to get into it. I want to talk about it, so there's going to be spoilers. So this starts off super meta. I've heard it compared to Wes Craven's A New Nightmare, which makes complete sense if you've seen A Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. When Wes Anderson did A New Nightmare, it started his exploration into adding meta meta references to previous films in the franchise to help tell this new story, like movie within a movie. Very much what he went on to do with Scream. But the beginning of this movie is very much that. It's back to Thomas Anderson, who's, he was Keanu Reeves. He is a video game developer, and he is riding off of the success of his original Matrix video game. So on the premise where this movie starts is that Keanu Reeves developed this mind-blowing video game called The Matrix, and so in the discussion while they're trying to come back, Warner Brothers, who owns his video game studio, they want him to come out with a fourth installment, a fourth game in the Matrix series. So him and the other developers, all of their talk and banter are references to the original Matrix movies, references to fan theories of where what the originals were about, where they should take the story. Like it very much is like the audience is watching the movie reflect all of the discussions that the audience has had over the past 20 years since the first Matrix came out, because it's such a unique story, and there's so much depth that's not even close to explored or explained in all of these movies, which leads to the ability to have discussions about the movies, the theories of what's going on with the Matrix, how it all fits. The story's a little bit complex in the first three, a little bit too complex in my opinion, but still great. Still a great kind of franchise through line, 3 movies in a row. And this one starts off very much, so much meta in this one that it literally starts with characters inside the Matrix, which we don't know is the Matrix, but it starts like the first Matrix, except for instead of Trinity in this dark room, the cops are going up. It's like, they don't need any help for just one little girl. And it's like, oh, sir, your men are already dead. Like all of the same lines, obviously different actors, obviously said a little bit differently, filmed a little bit from a different angle, but it's almost like a parody movie. This movie starts off, and it takes you out, took me out pretty hard. On the second viewing, I was completely in. Once you understand what you're looking at, it makes a lot more sense. You have context for it. But just watching this movie out of the box, super anticipating, not really have high expectations because it's been so long. It's only one of the Wachowski siblings. It's Lana Wachowski on her own. So it's like I was super excited, but I had very tempered expectations because I know how these things can go. And when it started out, I was like, oh no, this is going like hardcore Star Wars Awakens kind of stuff. But it's not. It's not. It just kind of starts that way. I think it's just a head fake of these people that made this movie saying, fuck you to the audience. Like, we're going to do whatever we want to do. It's not your movie. This is our movie. We're telling our story. And plus, a lot of the themes from the Matrix series have been hijacked by a lot of, right-wing people that like to think that they're literally living in, a completely different version of reality than everybody else. Out of all of the people that you could put into a group that are not living in the quote-unquote real world, it's all the people that act like they took the red pill because they know conspiracy theories. Like a couple things have happened. Anyway. The Many Faces is an ongoing abstract ink portrait series that I started many years ago. I release a new face every day, but go to inspireddisorder.com to check them out. So many available. But as a listener to The Ray Taylor Show, you can save 10% when you use coupon code INSPIRED when you check out. So go to inspireddisorder.com/TMF, that stands for The Many Faces. Go check them out, browse the entire collection, and when you decide on a piece, or maybe multiple pieces, make sure you use coupon code INSPIRED when you check out, and you'll save 10%. As a big thank you for checking out my work, for collecting my work, and for listening to The Ray Taylor Show. And with that said, let's get back to the show. It's been hijacked, and I think that this movie is in some ways trying to communicate with those people and let them. I'm sure those are the people that hate this movie, because this movie is it's a love story. I mean, the franchise is very much a love story. The only reason Thomas Anderson becomes the one is because Trinity falls in love with him. Like, if you watch the first Matrix, it's not, he dies. Spoilers for the first Matrix. He dies at the end of this movie. He gets shot by Agent Smith. But he's brought back to life when Carrie Ann Moss, Trinity, says this, like, well, this is what the Oracle told me. And she gives him a kiss. Because she falls in love with him, gives him a kiss. He comes back to life as the one. Now, before that, he's done crazy things, because he's allowed his brain to be open and free to the possibility that he can do these things, which you see a lot of the other characters. It's almost like when Tony Hawk did a 900 or whatever that trick was. It's like this undoable trick. And then now, like, you see skateboarders who can, there's a lot of people that can do it. Like, once you see something, once you see the possibility of something, it's a lot easier to start doing it than that first person to try and do a thing that's never been done before. And I don't even think Tony Hawk was the first to do it. I think there was a documentary about it. Anyway, but that's a similar type of a thing that happens with these people when they're in the Matrix and they know they're in the Matrix and they're able to do these superhuman things almost. At least fight superhuman. Neo was able to learn how to fly at one point. But yeah. And also in the... so he's trying to... He's trying to develop this new game. He's also kind of in development of a new other game. And that other game is like running simulations to train the AI or whatever. It's in a modal. And that is what we were seeing when the movie started. That kind of parody look of the first Matrix movie is this game running this modal, which the characters mention it in that scene. But it really comes together once you see, it's like, oh, they're in a video game of this video game that Thomas Anderson created called The Matrix, which the first three movies were about. But then it turns into, we find out that, you know, Neil Patrick Harris is in this movie. He plays his therapist. The medication he takes are blue pills, which are the pills that you take if you want to stay in the Matrix. You take the red pill if you want to be woke. Not fascist, if you want to wake up from the Matrix. So a lot of things are kind of pointing towards the fact that maybe Thomas Anderson isn't in the real world. Like, you're not sure. Like, it feels very much like the real world, even more than like the first Matrix or any of the Matrix movies when they're in the Matrix. How it never really feels like a real world necessarily. Always has like kind of a Matrixy look to it. Where this one, it actually looks like, you know, just a standard. But it's also, we find out, like, things are pointing towards it, but we find out that he's in the Matrix. Again, like, it's a new version of the Matrix. Redesigned after the events of the third movie, where everything resets. They reboot. They put out a new version of the Matrix. And this new version, which in real world time has happened. It's been 60 years. So it's a 60-year version update. So it's a far more realistic looking of a Matrix. But then Carrie-Anne Moss and Keanu, or their characters, Trinity and Neo, they don't age. They only age 20 years, which they don't explain. They bring it up, how it's weird. I think they did that because of casting. I think that's a line of dialogue, I think, that explains why there's not all these other people from the original movies who would have been. Because Neo in this movie, in this franchise, in this story, is like a superhero. He is their Superman. He's been able to do things that nobody's been able to do ever. So they like idolize him. So there would have been, for sure, if any of them were alive, this, didn't have that kind of weird, like, oh, they only aged 20 years in the pods, but 60 years in real life. It makes sense. But we see one of the characters who's, just covered in makeup, which is fine. But I don't know. This movie's so much a love story about Neo and Trinity. It's a lot about Trinity. This is almost Trinity's movie in a lot of ways. I mean, we don't spend a ton of time, but the whole premise of this is, so Neo gets out. Neo gets out of the Matrix again. Kind of a similar scene from the first Matrix. But then he gets carried away by a robot, and then we find out that they're working together, robots and humans. So he gets out. We find out about the age gap thing. We see, what's her face, is still in this one. Jada Pinkett Smith. She's Niobe. She's wearing tons of makeup because she's supposed to be 60 years older. So she's like, I don't know. I don't know the math on that. So she's probably like 90, I guess. I don't know how old Carrie-Anne Moss and Keanu Reeves are, but she's definitely playing an old lady. And there's all these new characters, very colorful. The new Zion is called Io, and it's they're in the process of making food again, like genetically engineering strawberries and things like that. It's very much a place that is far more progressed, has progressed far more than the original Zion. Like this is like, it's beautiful, like paradise almost. And they just got really good at hiding, but they have like an artificial sky. It's like it's light years better of a situation that these survivors are in than from the first movie. And that plays into some of this as well, because there's because the Matrix has gone so good, and because they have it so good now on the outside in the real world, quote unquote, the real world in Io. They have it so good that everybody's kind of just comfortable. Like, people don't really want to leave the Matrix. And, in Io, they don't really want to cause giant war because they kind of got it good. Like, they're doing what they can. They're building a nice life. Join Inspired Disorder Plus today. Head on over to inspireddisorder.com/plus to join. Membership includes members-only discounts and deals. You get access to the Ray Taylor Show completely ad-free, as well as bonus episodes. You get access to the complete live painting archive. You also get access to every single podcast ever produced by Inspired Disorder, hosted by Ray Taylor. You get access to Ray Taylor's personal blog, as well as the opportunity to ask me any questions. So if you want to start a podcast, you're into art, ask me anything. And so many more things are being added every day to Inspired Disorder Plus. So sign up today, become a member, head on over to inspireddisorder.com/plus and become an Inspired Disorder Plus member today. So that's fun. It's fun that, updated characters, new characters, everything kind of looks a little bit different. I don't think it was shot nearly as good as the first three movies. Aside from the end, there's no real amazing action set pieces in this movie. It is very much about Neo wanting to free Trinity, because when he got carried away, when he got out of the pod, he looked down and saw her in a pod next to him. And then we also find, Neil Patrick Harris he's kind of like the new architect. And he found out that having them as the two main battery sources and having the Matrix revolve around them and to have them just messing with people has proven to produce far more energy for the robots. So a lot of the commentary in this movie is what modern day life is like in a lot of ways. The realities that they're facing where people are too comfortable to actually stand up and do anything about it. Businesses are profiting exponentially over fucking with people. It's hard to get a job, a minimum wage. It's impossible to survive on a minimum wage job in this country unless you live in some rural town somewhere, So all that stuff is interesting. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the video game stuff at the top, misdirect kind of a thing, where they got to discuss all of the fan theories and the hypotheses of where the story could go. I kind of thought this would have been like a Matrix within the Matrix, like they thought the real world is actually just another level of the Matrix, which they could still do. Because if you can have one virtual reality, then there could be virtual realities inside of that. It's kind of what infinite means. So there's definitely potential for that story. It also had a lot of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind vibes. Like Keanu, there's a lot of scenes from previous movies are used in this, which, all of that stuff was kind of too much on the first viewing. But during the second viewing, it's just it all falls into place. It all makes sense because everybody's a huge fanboy of the Matrix in this movie, of Neo. Just as the people watching the movie are huge fanboys of the franchise, most of them are, so are the characters within this story because of what he's been able to do. So I enjoyed all of that. There's a heist moment where they're this is how we're going to get Trinity out of her pod. So they have this heist thing, which is very similar in a lot of ways to the scene in the first Matrix. Not visually. I mean, it's an epic scene in the first Matrix. But the scene where they're going to break Morpheus out of Morpheus just got caught by the agents, and they're trying to hack his brain. So Neo and Trinity are going to, we need guns, and then the guns fly in, and there's the helicopter, Gatling gun. I mean, it's one of the most amazing action set pieces ever. That from we need to get guns to the lobby scene, to the helicopter Gatling gun scene, the speech from Agent Smith about how humans are a virus. You got Lawrence Fishburne not jumping all the way, so Neo has to catch him in midair. And then the helicopter gets shot at, so it's going down, and Trinity's got to swing out at the last moment. The helicopter blows up. It's one of the most, it's amazing thing after amazing thing. And he's not even the one yet. The first Matrix is amazing. They changed the technology. Obviously, there's no landlines anymore, so they explain that by, we've been able to use mirrors. Because that's how he was able to get out of the Matrix, was through the mirror in the first one. So it makes sense that they're able now to get in and out of the Matrix through mirrors. They're also able to use, once they're in the Matrix, also able to use doors as a way to teleport to different parts of the Matrix. So it's even the technology within their ability to maneuver, even in the new Matrix, is upgraded. Like every little aspect of this is upgraded a little bit. The way agents, there's like a swarm mode, which is just like zombie mode, especially once it happens at the end of this movie, when Neo and Trinity are like succeeding at ending this thing. Everything in the world is now attacking them as she's trying to drive away on her motorcycle, and you have bodies torpedoing out windows. It's heavy. It is zombie mode in a video game, but like crazy. Like it turns into a horror movie at one point. But yeah, I really do I want more of these movies, even though like they win or whatever. Trinity. There's the great moment where Trinity learns to fly. Like this whole thing, Neo is kind of, they're both like out of it. They're not very good because they've been pumped for 60 years. They've been in the Matrix, being messed with. So they're not very good at what they do. They can still do some stuff, but he can't like fly. He mostly does like he's like forcing things away, that like Hadouken power. So it's fun. It's fun. The end, there's a band doing a cover of Rage Against the Machine, which I'm not a fan of. If I had to make a wish, rub a lamp and make a wish to make this movie better, and no offense to the band at all. I mean, if I were making this movie and choosing music, and it's not a song that even exists, I don't think. But if I'm making a wish, then I can make it exist. And that song would be, to end this movie, when the credits hit. First off, it's still got to be Rage Against the Machine. They've closed out everything. It makes sense that it is the cover band that finishes this movie is a female singer, which makes sense considering the director has transitioned since the first 3 movies from male to female. So it makes sense commenting on that within the movie, which a lot of this movie is commenting on that as well. Just evolving, moving past, transitioning, all of those things. I would have loved, knowing all that, stick with Rage Against the Machine, but they do a cover of Power of Love. That would be amazing. Because you'd have the same sound as Rage, which is unmistakable. But this movie is about the power of love. More so than all of the other movies. I mean, they did have their love story, but this one, not only was it a love story, but it's also about Trinity realizing that she was the second part of the one being the one. And she has like the abilities. I don't know if she has the abilities outside of the Matrix like he did, but it's a weird thing to enjoy a movie, because I did like it, but then watching it a second time, everything, because you have context for everything, which is important when you're dealing with different realities and stuff like that. Watching it the second time, I enjoyed it quite a bit more. So I would check it out. I haven't heard I've heard some negative reviews of this movie. I've also heard positive reviews. But I haven't heard anybody that like hates it. I know there's people out there, 100%, and they're probably the most annoying people ever. But you might be one of those people. So if you want to explain why you didn't like the movie or hated the movie, please hit me up. I'd be interested to hear a different point of view, I guess. But I enjoyed it. And if you didn't like it necessarily the first time, but you want to like it, give it a second shot, because I think once you know all of the what to expect, there's not going to be you're not going to see a mind-blowing action film like the first one was. You're just never going to see that. But I think like the sequels of the first one, how they weren't necessarily received very well, I think, and then now I think they're looking back that now that we've seen how kind of horrible most action movies are still. Like, no movie has really touched the first Matrix. I mean, everything holds up in that movie. No movie's done it since then. Since 1999, Some movies have gotten close. They've gotten better at certain things, but nothing has the kind of action set pieces that the first one has, especially these follow-up movies, which deal a lot more with the stories and backstories and stuff. But anyway, check it out. It's on HBO Max right now, in theaters if you want to go risk getting the Omicron virus or whatever. But I love it. I'm probably going to watch it multiple times again because it was a lot of fun. And I really enjoyed it, especially after the second viewing. But that's it. Matrix, The Matrix Resurrections. New episodes of The Ray Taylor Show come out every single day. Subscribe on YouTube and everywhere our podcasts are found. Binge the full week over at InspiredDisorder.com/plus. Buy Ray Taylor Show merch over at InspiredDisorder.com. And follow the show on Instagram at Ray Taylor Show. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Peace out!
Today is the day where you wake up and you realize that everything that you've been dreaming about, everything that you've been wanting, every goal and wish and hope that you've ever had can become real. Dreams can come true. What you manifest in your mind, you can